Hey everyone, in this video I wanted to react to two primary articles and really this notion that someone can be lucky or unlucky in love. And it's a phrase we often hear a lot, that he just had no luck or she just had no luck dating. And again, it takes me to the first article that I want to read through. So the title says, I had 300 Tinder matches but couldn't get a date, so I tried a new tactic. And it continues on to say in the subtitle that Josh Wood, 31, became fed up with dating apps after years of swiping, but no real dates. So after removing his accounts and finding love the old-fashioned way, he was inspired to come up with an invention of his own. And again, the article continues on saying, a man who swiped endlessly on dating apps but couldn't get a date has finally found love the old-fashioned way and created an app of his own to help others do the same. Josh Wood, 31, was in his early 20s when he first downloaded Tinder and reckons he was one of its earliest users, even being invited to the dating app's launch party. Josh, originally from Surrey but now living in London, has high hopes for Tinder. But as the years went by and more dating apps like Hinge and Bumble crowded the field, Josh found himself with lots of potential interest but very few real-life dates. And it's an interesting idea or concept, you would think, that as the dating market has exploded, has grown wider, larger, with more, again, potential interest, as the article states, that surely no person, no man could go 300 dates, or they could be matched with 300 people and not have a single date. But again, it's a principle that we see bore out in many other spheres and domains. And not a directly related example, but even if you just think of the globalization of markets, of economic markets, and the rise of multinational organizations and conglomerates like Facebook, Apple, Google, IBM, name as many as you want, as the markets have grown, or I guess as markets grow, the average user does not necessarily gain more. Instead, what we see in markets is that they tend to be monopolised, or what Jordan Peterson may call the Pareto distribution, that there's a typically uneven or asymmetrical distribution of one property among all individuals. And again, as we see in the technology world or in economics, you see multinational groups, you see a handful of entities hoover up all of the market share. And again, this isn't an especially new principle for, I guess, the black pill world or the red pill world or the manosphere, if you want to title that as that. And again, it's a principle often referred to as the 80-20 rule, but it's something that seems to go missing when discussing the nature of luck or the lack of luck in the dating world. So the article continues on. Overall, Josh reckons he had 300 matches across dating apps in the years he was using them, but he was frustrated when hardly any of them led to dates. And a key phrase is under the picture of Josh. So it says, Josh tried Tinder and other dating apps, but never had much luck. And again, that was the trigger. In many ways, what he experienced is not him being devoid or bereft of luck. It's probably very typical for people like Josh and for, dare I say it, most just relatively average men, that it's not an absence of luck that he's experienced, he has just experienced the dating world in the 21st century for the average man. And that you might think, wow, even regardless if the dating world became more difficult or brutal, that surely he must have had a date after 300 matches. But again, as we'll see in the next article, this again seems not that he had an unlucky experience, but rather his experience is exactly what you would expect when the very makeup of these apps is to, again, weed out those that are just less desirable. So again, it continues on. When I moved to London, I continued to use dating apps for about a year. I tried them all, but I always had the same frustration that girls didn't reply, Josh told the Mirror. So it says, he explained, he thinks there are pros and cons to how apps have changed the dating scene. I think they have obviously made it a lot easier to date and opened you up to a lot of new people. You can connect with someone so easily, and there are so many success stories, he explained. But he added, people have a lot more choice, and it makes people picky. They're just looking for that absolutely perfect person because they can swipe through 5,000 people. So it goes on to basically explain that after giving up on his search for love, he knuckled down, focused on other things in his life, and then eventually went on to develop his own application called, I think it's called Block, where people essentially just meet up at various venues and they can decide whether they want to meet up in the first place or whether they're going to meet up as a date or something more platonic. But really, the key phrase in all of this is the idea that Josh was unlucky in love, which takes me to my second article, which is called, or the title rather. So it says, one chart that shows how women are at a huge advantage when it comes to online dating. And again, the main purpose of this video isn't to the main purpose of this video is to demonstrate that Josh wasn't simply unlucky in love, that actually his experiences were very typical for the vast majority of just average guys like Josh. And that what may seem as a bleak reality is, well, it's a bleak reality, but it's not an uncommon reality. So again, I'll continue on. So it says, online dating, for all its faults and critiques, has become one of the most popular ways Americans find love. One awesome side effect of this is that we now have access to a realm of data that has never been available before. How people talk, interact, and communicate prior to entering a relationship. And one thing that should be worrisome for straight men is the size of their disadvantage in the market. Josh Fisher is the Director of Product Insights at Snap Interactive, the company that owns the dating website Are You Interested? And areyouinterested.com has 20 million members, and Josh sent over some fascinating charts that look at the probability of women and men responding to messages given the age of the sender. So it continues on saying, basically everyone is more likely to respond to a message from someone younger than they are. No, sorry, I've completely butchered that line. Basically, everyone is more likely to respond to a message from someone younger than they are from someone older. And it says, here's the probability a woman responds to a message from a man on ay.com. The vertical axis is the probability of response, and it basically just explains what this chart means. So it basically just demonstrates that usually, so men across on the x-axis is age relative to the female that they have messaged, and then obviously on the y-axis is the percent response rate that they've received. So if a man is 10 years younger than the women that they're messaging, they have a response rate that is relatively high, maybe about 8 or 9%. And then if the man is 10 years older than the person that they've messaged, their response rate is maybe about 1 or 2% of the messages that they send out, that they'll receive a reply. And it continues on saying, here's the probability a man responding to a message from a woman. Note that the response rates across all age differences are way higher. And again, just in the same sort of format, the likelihood a US man responds to a woman on this dating website. And again, it's much, I mean, first of all, it's at between 20 to 25%, which should be noted. And then the response rate is higher. I think that, is that right? Yeah, so the response rate for men never breaches 10%, whereas for women, regardless of how that woman is in relation to the man that she's messaging, it never dips below 10%. So if she sends 10 messages, she'll always receive at least one message, regardless of how that person is in relation to herself. Whereas for a man, regardless of how he is in relation to the women that he messages, he'll almost never get one message on average from 10 results. He'll get probably slightly less or significantly less than one message, depending on how he is in relation to the woman. And it just shows the two charts merged together. So again, this is where it becomes more relevant to the previous article. So the first thing, comparing men and women responding to people their own age. Women respond to men 4% of the time, while men respond to women around 18% of the time. So what does that mean? Generally speaking, an average straight man will have to send 25 messages to a woman his own age just to procure one response, while the average straight woman will have to send 5 messages in order to get one response. And again, it says that's fascinating and also could be an explanation. Men sending a lot more messages than women for this disparity. Again, that's entirely plausible. So again, when you think of in these apps, so I can't necessarily say about what the demographic is in this particular app, but in apps like Tinder and Bumble and so on, there's usually a 3 or 4 to 1 fraction of men to women. So there's usually 3 or 4 times the number of men as there is the number of women. So straight away, there's a significant population imbalance on these apps. And when we see here that, again, the population imbalance is very well one of the contributing factors for why there's such a low response rate for men, or such a low rate that they'll receive a response, rather. So if a woman only responds to around 4% of the messages that she receives, and again, this says nothing about the level of response that the man will get in terms of dates, or whether this will lead to a relationship, or even something just more casual. So when you think about Josh's story, and he matches with 300 people, and he receives no replies, and again or he receives no dates. Again, that seems entirely congruent. If we presume that he actually had 300 matches over the course of his dating experiences, we could presume, again, based on these results, that he maybe received, so 4%, about 12 messages, maybe 12 to 15 messages, depending on maybe the demographic makeup of the people that he was messaging. So he may have received maybe about 12 replies, maybe 12 to 15 replies across these 300 matches. And again, when you boil it down to that, only across 12 messages or 12 conversations where he received a reply, again, it entirely makes sense why someone would not necessarily have a date after 300 matches. That is not a fantastical or surprising story. Again, it's in many ways very typical. This isn't a bug of the dating experience. This is a feature, and it's a feature because of very many factors, like the population imbalance, that, even the social convention that men should they should approach or initiate first in any amorous relationships. The idea of hypergamy, again, is very likely an explanation as to why men like Josh struggle to initiate any messages, and for these messages to then lead on to any dates. Because straight away, not only is there a population imbalance? But then we have, it grants women of the same age, of the same backgrounds, maybe even the same level of attractiveness, many more options and much more power. So we basically see, like we do in any other marketplace, a polarization where there is an ever smaller number of people. So maybe say, if there's a 3-to-1 relationship, maybe only 1/4 of all people on Tinder, for example, can reliably go on dates. So if there's 3 times the number of men, there's only roughly 25% of women, and we presume that the vast majority of these women are able to date. Again, it shows how, irrespective of the number of options available, that doesn't mean that the average person will gain more. If anything, you see more of a disproportionate distribution across the entire population. You see those that, again, in the Pareto distribution, those that have some, or those that have more, gain even more. And those that have less gain fractionally or proportionately less than those that have more. And again, that's mostly of what I wanted to talk about in this video. How it can seem almost surprising or unfathomable that someone can go and have 300 matches, or that even the stereotype that the 40-year-old virgin, again, when you're so outnumbered, or not outnumbered, when there's such a paucity of people that you can engage with, when the standards are just out of whack, when there's so little genuine prospect on these applications, it's very easy to see how there's a rise of inceldom, or of the black pill philosophy, or the red pill philosophy in the manosphere generally, because these are apps that, again, it's not that these people are unlucky, these people are typical. They're not atypical, they're not unlucky. These are people that are experiencing the features of the applications, not a bug, not an aberration. And it's very easy to see how people, men, in these applications can very easily end up feeling insignificant or invisible or alienated from the dating process or from the wider dating world. And again, I'll wrap up there. And also, I wanted to say as well, just in my own personal life, I'm hoping actually to be working on a research project about the radicalization of incel beliefs. So if anyone's watched the second part of the Black Pill kind of, I guess, mini-series, I'm hoping to actually have much of what I said in that study actually produced in a published paper at some point. So I'm working as a volunteer researcher at the University of Dundee, and we're hoping to see whether the hypothesis that I lay out in that second video, that, again, very much in keeping with this video and these articles, that when people feel a sense of alienation, they feel left out, they feel invisible, they feel insignificant, that they often go to these spheres like the incel world or the manosphere more generally, because this provides a sense of significance that they otherwise cannot get, that this offers them a sense of purpose and a sense of community, and an idea that they can integrate their experiences into a larger belief system. And again, if anyone wants to hear me talk more about this research project, I would gladly answer any questions or any ideas that you have to contribute. So I'll wrap it up there. But again, if you've liked this video, leave a like. If you want more of these videos, then subscribe. And thank you for watching. Take care.